Hi, and welcome to Mindful, Beautiful, and Thriving, a podcast series by Tharaka Foundation focused on youth mental health. Before we begin today's episode, I just wanted to let you all know that all content that is found in our podcast is created for informational purposes only. This content is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, treatment, or therapy. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition, and never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard in this podcast. Thank you so much, and without further ado, let's get started.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Mindful, Beautiful, and Thriving. Today, we're going to learn how to nurture our strengths to maximize our results. We'll learn where to put effort into reaching our full potential because, as we know, genius is not born, it's made. With us today, we have a remarkable guest, Dr. Gayle Bentley, who works with 2E students, twice exceptional kids, to help them use their skills and strengths to help them grow emotionally, socially, and academically. And these methods that she uses can also be applied and used by everyone. So before we dive any deeper, Dr. Gayle, could you please share more about yourself and your story?
Yes. Thank you so much, Seerat, for inviting me on your podcast. I've always cared very deeply about education. I've always been really interested in how students and children learn. So I've been a public school teacher for 25 years. Now, as I was teaching, I had my own sons. I have three sons, and all three are gifted and twice exceptional. So in that journey, with them, learning all the things that I needed to help them and work with them and emphasize their strengths, I really became interested in helping all gifted and twice exceptional students in any way that I could, and to serve as an advocate and hopefully change maker in my career. So I did recently go back to school at Bridges Graduate School, and I earned a doctorate in cognitive diversity and education. So I've really studied how gifted and twice exceptional students learn and what we can do as teachers and parents to make school and home as pleasant and enjoyable, and really to help them reach their potential, which will then help their mental health and allow them to feel really good about themselves.
Yeah, I really liked how your goal is to help everyone. Before we continue, I just want to ask, what does 2E mean?
Thank you for asking that. So 2E is a shortened term for twice exceptional. And students who are twice exceptional are considered gifted in one or more areas, and they have a disability in one or more areas. So, for example, my youngest son, who's 13 years old, he is profoundly gifted. That was how he tested when he was younger. And he also has dyslexia. And so when he was young, he he's verbally very precocious and, really seemed pretty bright, but he was not learning to read. And so as a kindergartner, end of kindergarten, he was not learning to spell, he was not learning to read. And so it really became confusing. I couldn't really understand, what was happening. He had two older brothers who had easily learned to read, and he wasn't able to. And so this is hard to imagine, but as a 6 year old, he actually said he didn't want to live anymore. Can you imagine a 6 year old saying something like that? I mean, what appeared to be a cheerful, typical 6 year old, because he was so unhappy that he could talk about advanced topics. I mean, he would talk about things like climate change, even as a 6 year old, the big ideas that he cared about, but he couldn't read. He couldn't spell. He couldn't really write. And he could see his classmates around him doing those things. And so it caused him so much angst. And I see this all the time in young students, but as you get older, it can get more and more difficult, if both your strengths and your challenges aren't addressed. And so, I of course took him to a therapist, and then I worked with him, and he had and we worked in his strengths, and I did all his dyslexia training for 3 years. And now he's a happy, healthy, very successful eighth grader. So, but it just is shocking to think back that that could be what a 6 year old could say, because of what they can and can't do, or what they think they can and can't do.
I see. Is that what inspired you to start the Bentley Center to help everyone? Because you also had
It was
experience with this?
It was as I went along in the journey. So, I ended up with three children with 8 different diagnoses, including giftedness and profound giftedness. My oldest son went to college when he was 13 years old. So that's pretty unique. He's now 19 and he has a master's degree and he's working at a startup in Palo Alto. So, all three of my kids have had very different journeys. We've done homeschooling, we've done charter school, we've done, one grade acceleration, subject acceleration. We've done all these things. And so through that journey, I thought, it was really challenging for me as a parent, even as a teacher, with that experience. So I want to do everything I can to help parents and teachers and of course students in their journey. So I think it really was it's been a number of years at this point, and so I'm ready to reach out and help as much as I can.
Wow. So how does the center help other students?
So the Bentley Center at this point has been around for about a year and a half, and so it's online at this point. It's the bentleycenter.com, and currently I work virtually with parents who might need resources. They may need help finding a different school for their child. They may need help finding some special enrichment activities. I also give special strength-based profiles, which I can do either in person or virtually with students. So I'll actually write up a full, I'll talk to the students and give them some assessments, and then I'll write up a full report that only talks about their strengths. Does not, we're not focusing on the challenges, which often is what happens when students have strengths and challenges. So I'll do that. And then I also run parent support and education groups. And so I do this virtually at this point, but I'm excited to announce next summer I'm combining with another LLC called the Talent Hub. So in Orange County, where I live, we're going to start offering special enrichment, project-based, interest-based classes for gifted and twice exceptional students. And I'm not aware that there's anything else quite like that in Orange County.
Wow. So this the strength-based profile and report you were talking about reminds me of like the strength-based approach that's used commonly now. And that approach focuses on utilizing strengths to reach full potential. So this leads me to wonder that once we know our strengths, how can we apply them to like different areas of our life, such as using logic to analyze text?
What were you think? Can you go talk a little bit more about what you were thinking about with logic to analyze text?
Like I was wondering, a student might be really good at math and advanced in that, but how can they use like the skills of logic in another class or another area of life, which would be like
Yeah.
critical thinking or analyzing?
Okay, that's exactly what we're thinking about. For neurodivergent students I would say this is probably true for most humans, but for neurodivergent students, and by that I mean gifted and twice exceptional, for those type of students, it's very difficult for them to do things that they consider to be hard or things that they're not interested in. So you probably, a typical teenager probably has that as well, but it's more so if they are neurodivergent. That's an inherent part of having autism or being autistic or having ADHD or dyslexia in some cases. And so if we can help them, I mean, this is what I do with my own sons all the time, but if we help them find what they're interested in, and then it helps them kind of bring the challenging part along. So I'll give an example of my middle son who's in high school now, who's a junior in high school. He's really interested in music. He plays, I think, 5 different instruments and he has perfect pitch and, really interested in music. And he wanted to be in the marching band when he got to high school. So, he signed up for marching band. Now, marching band, and I've taught marching band, so I was a music teacher. So I know about marching band. It's hot, it's long, it's many hours. You're out in the sun, you're thirsty, in his case, he was either carrying a giant bass drum or he was carrying a sousaphone, which is the big tuba that weighs 35 pounds. Like you're sweating when you're out there doing these rehearsals. All of that part, I don't think he would have loved. Like he necessarily loved. He didn't like being thirsty. He doesn't like it when he's hungry and he doesn't get a snack right away. He doesn't want to stand in the heat. Like those things were difficult for him. But because he loved music so much, he was willing to tolerate all of that. And as he practiced tolerating that, his tolerance grew. And so from freshman to junior year, now it's nothing for him to go do an 8-hour marching band rehearsal carrying this 35-pound sousaphone. But he had to kind of learn to tolerate that, even though it's in a situation with has, lots of other things that are probably hard for everybody. Does that make sense? That it was his love of music and his interest, in being with other kids who are interested in music. That's what really
Yeah.
got him through when it was hard.
Yeah,
And
I like that.
and so I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, so you can continue. Sorry.
I was just going to say that, you just see that it's kind of that idea of you don't know what you can do until you find something that you love, and then you're willing to sacrifice really for it, right? You're willing to do hard things. That's And again, for neurodivergent folks, that can be difficult. And so that's where we use their strengths to kind of encourage them. I mean, it's the same thing as a younger child who doesn't like to read. That reading's difficult for them. Maybe they have dyslexia, or they just don't want to sit still long enough to read. Well, you know what? Let's figure out what they love. If they love dragons, then you know what? Let's look for every series we can find that have to do with dragons. Wings of Fire. My youngest always loved that series. Let's find a really cool series, and then maybe the parent reads to them for a while, and then they get into the story, and then maybe they're willing to take over and read for themselves, even though reading might not be a preferred activity. But they got to know about the story because the story is talking about dragons. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I liked how you said that because of like a love for something, you're able to tolerate the difficulties, which then like ultimately increases your overall tolerance for other difficult things. So I think that was a really good, clear answer. So how can we use this approach? So you already like mentioned a little how we can use it to overcome challenges. So how could we apply these to like our areas of growth, especially? Like the other question focused on this like in general, like we increased our tolerance, but how can we use our strengths to help um help overcome challenges in like a completely different area of life? So like if someone's good at math and calculations, using that in cooking or like everyday things, something that's like opposite.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think you almost have this sounds funny to say trick yourself, but think about, well, okay, I have to cook because let's say you're my oldest son, you're 19, you live in your own apartment, you've never really lived on your own, but you've got to eat, right? So you think about, well, I've got to cook because I want to eat. Well, think about I would think the going to the store, the grocery store part, give yourself a budgeting challenge. Maybe you love working with numbers. Hey, let's see, can I get 2 weeks worth of food for $100? I don't know. Let me see. And kind of focus on like the mathematical part of how am I going to get through, doing this grocery trip and taking it home and putting it away. And then in the cooking aspect, obviously there's lots of measurement going with cooking that maybe would be interesting to that person. I've actually used the opposite. I've worked with younger students who don't like cooking, or sorry, excuse me, who don't like math. So they don't like numbers, but they love cooking. So we say, oh, well, let's go in the kitchen and let's cook. And now they have to use math kind of incidentally. Well, they've got to measure, right? So now these little guys are learning about math, even though they would tell you they don't like math. But they love cooking. So that's what allows them to tolerate the math. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So you said that to focus on the strength part of the challenge and then you'll get better at the
And then
challenge.
exactly, it's almost like you sneak in the challenge, right? And it's like, well, let me give another example. At my school where I teach, the kids do projects. Students are chosen to do projects, and let's say a sixth grade history class studies ancient Greece. Well, the cool part about this project that they get to do is each student, so let's say there's 6 students, each student has to do a project about either ancient Greece or Greek mythology, but they can tailor it to what they're interested in. So I, as their facilitator, meet with each of the 6 students and say, well, what kind of stuff are you just interested just in general in your life? What are the things you do? What are your hobbies? So my youngest was chosen for that group, and he's a cellist and he loves music. So he actually studied the music of ancient Greece. He actually found the oldest piece of music ever, the manuscript actually ever written, and he found a recording of that, and he made that part of his presentation, and then he played a piece from that time period on his instrument. And so that was, he was able to focus on that. He may not have been interested in every aspect of ancient Greece, but he's a musician, so he wanted to look at the instruments of the time and the style and when it would have been played. Another student was super into Greek mythology and loved Legos, like even as a sixth grader. And actually, this just loved Legos. And so he created that, and he had a great gift for visual and spatial things too. And so he made thrones with each god goddess out of Lego characters on this platform. And I think he did the six main ones. And I mean, they were beautiful. They were done in all the right colors with the right theme. Poseidon was, ocean and blue and had the scepter. And I mean, they were just amazing. And this kid was just totally in love with Legos and just could figure out how to make this stuff look really cool. So each of the six kids picked six totally different aspects of ancient Greece. And so, I don't know if any of them, if that ancient Greece was their first choice, but they loved that they got to study what they were interested in and then how it was integrated into their curriculum. Like the ancient Greece was dictated by the school.
I like that. And your response tied to my next question. You mentioned that you would like meet with the students and you would find what they're interested in. So how can we identify not only our own strengths and skills, but others' too?
Yeah, I love that you were thinking about that. I like to think that I think parents and teachers, but even we as students, we want to be talent scouts of others. We want to notice in our everyday life, what are as a teenager, what are your friends really good at? I mean, you may have a friend who's just a really wonderful writer, and you may have another friend who's, an artist and loves to, make things, and maybe you're wonderful with numbers. And so, at least in thinking about school, since I imagine most of our listeners are in school, when you're working in groups, it really would help, if you think about it, to just go around the group and say, hey, what do each of you love to do? And how could we use that skill in this project? And that is what we do at our school. But I think you, even as students, could do that, even if it wasn't a requirement of the class. You're in this group and you think, like, what is everybody's talent? And then how can each person be in charge of some different aspect of the project? And I think you'll end up with a way better project, and everybody's going to be more interested and be in flow and be happier as they do this. And you'll have fewer people who, don't put in the work if they're interested.
Yeah, I liked you also showed the benefit of using this, that if you don't use a strength-based approach, not many people will contribute. And one good way to have everyone to do what they want is to ask them, what do you love to do and how can we use it? Use that skill. So I really liked that. I'm going to use it. And so if I was listening to this podcast with you, I would immediately want to read your books and listen. So how can our audience learn more about you and your work?
Thank you for asking that. I think I mentioned it before, but you could go to thebentleycenter.com and see my website. Um, I have also written a book called Using Picture Books to Help Little Ones Learn About Themselves. And it actually is almost a mental health book, but for young children, and how their parents can enhance that using picture books. But I am actually currently working on a second book. So that one is not done and has not come out, but I'm excited about that.
Thank you. I will definitely be out looking for your second book soon. And so today with you, I learned a lot. I learned about the term talent scouts, where you notice what people are good at. Then we learned that how we can use the strength-based approach to overcome our challenges by tolerating and increasing our tolerance capacity so we can tolerate the challenges. And then we also learned about your center, the Bentley Center, which I think is amazing. So once again, thank you so much, Dr. Gayle, for taking your time out today to help us learn how we can maximize and use our strengths. I will definitely go and notice other people's talents in my family and at school, and I will use this saying, what do you love to do, and how can we use it? And I hope our audience took away something too. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure.
You are listening to Mindful, Beautiful, and Thriving, a podcast series by Tharaka Foundation. As part of our youth series, we will be releasing new episodes every month, so make sure to continue to check those out. We hope you enjoyed this podcast, and we thank you so much for listening.